Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right, I'm going to share my screen with all of you for this week's Lunch and Learn. It is, wait, where'd you all go? Okay, hold on a second. Got to bring you back so I can see your beautiful faces. There we go. All right, could everybody see my screen? Yes, shake your head. Yes, you can see my screen. Okay, very good. Oh, I should probably make it a little bit bigger, huh? Okay, how's that? Does that work?
It got smaller.
Smaller.
I know, that was my joke. It was a bad joke, but it was nevertheless the joke. Okay, here we go. How's that?
Great.
Hey.
Better?
Better.
Okay, so this morning or this afternoon, we have, let's see, one, two, three, four, five texts. 5 texts. Who do I think I am? Assuming that we're going to study 5 texts, but nevertheless, here we go. The first text from the Katav Sofer, who's the son of the Chatam Sofer, and the Chatam Sofer is the individual who created ultra-orthodoxy, what I would call today, a very traditional form of orthodoxy in response to the Reformation of Reform and Conservative Judaism. He was the counter to Samson Raphael Hirsch, who approached orthodoxy in a much more modern sense. So his son, whoops, sorry about that. Let me get rid of those. Okay, so his son says, the land shall yield its fruit and you shall eat your fill and you shall live upon it in security. Lily, would you read in the Hebrew for us? You're muted, Lily.
ונתנה הארץ פריה, ואכלתם לשובע, וישבתם לבטח עליה.
Okay, so what are we talking about? Give me some context. What's happening in Parshat Bahar B'chukotai? What are we learning? Leora, remember to unmute. There you go.
I think we are learning about the harvest and how we're supposed to let the land rest after 6 years.
Good. We're learning about Shemitah and eventually the Jubilee. And Shemitah is that, exactly as Leora said, 6 years we can work the land. In the 7th year, we need to let it lie fallow. What is the problem with letting the land lie fallow in a year? Right, what's the concern? Yeah, Jill.
You won't be able to feed your family or sell any of your produce or crops. So you won't have any livelihood for a year.
Exactly, right? If you live in a world where everybody is a farmer and we survive basically in the crops that we produce, or if we produce enough crops to be able to trade with other farmers so that we can then have enough in a year where you can't produce anything, how can you survive? So the verse comes to tell us, don't worry about it. The land shall yield its fruit and you shall eat your fill. You shall live upon it in security. You will be satisfied. How? We don't know. But God and the Torah is reassuring us that do not worry. We would not create, God would not create a law that would cause us physical and material harm. So therefore, if the Torah says to let the land lie fallow, there must be some way in which we will be able to survive. So let's take a look at Rashi's comments. Who would like to read for us? Jill, are you good with continuing to read?
Rashi comments, you shall eat your fill. This means that even in your innards, it will be a blessing. And you shall live upon it in security. And you will not worry, even during a drought. Later in Parshat bechukotai. Rashi comments, you will eat your fill of bread. You will eat but a little, and it will improve, be blessed in your innards. If it is promised that the land will provide prodigiously, what is the blessing that they will eat only a small amount? Why further is the nature of the promise that they will not worry in time of need? Doesn't this depend on a given person's character and nature, their capacity for faith and trust? Shouldn't it better have said that there will be no drought? Continue. We could answer this in light of the verse, a worker's sleep is sweet, whether he has much or little to eat, but the rich man's abundance doesn't let him sleep. Someone who has much and who eats much, who delights their soul, is constantly worried. What will they do if this abundance should cease? They will find it very difficult to wean themselves from this goodness and to become accustomed to a more constrained and pressured life. Thus, a worker's sleep is sweet, whether he has much or little to eat, because they are accustomed to all sorts of circumstances, to both plenty and lack, good and ill. But the rich man's abundance, that which accustoms them to plenty and to being pampered, doesn't let him sleep. Worry about the future robs them of sleep, since they are not accustomed to limitation.
I know this is a long one, but you're getting the, let's just pause here for a second. Are you getting the gist of what's going on? What is, when you go all the way back up to this top, right? The land shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat your fill, and you shall live upon security. How is it that the commentators are saying we're going to be able to achieve that? What's at stake here? Is it about how much the land will produce, or is it about something else? I'll highlight this line right here, right? That's the key. Does this depend on a given person's character and nature, their capacity for faith and trust? What is this mitzvah all about?
I think it's that God doesn't always give you what you want. Like maybe we want more food or gifts and blessings, but God gives you what you need. And so you'll have enough to survive, even if it's not exactly what you desire.
Okay, so then it's really, is it about God?
It's about our ability to manage the situation and I guess manage our expectations.
Very good.
We can be as, mentally, psychologically, and obviously physically productive as possible during the day.
Good. And, we could have, yeah, go ahead, Judy.
It reminds me of people that are hoarding toilet paper and all kinds of things, but they're still not getting any sleep because they're so worried about what they might not have.
Yeah, that's what I thought of when I chose this text. I thought of the people's situation, how in a world in which, especially in the very beginning of COVID, less so today, but even today, certainly with the economic struggles that our country is engaging in and will continue to engage in, how do we approach what it is that we have and what it is that we don't have? It's a matter more of, in some instances, there's no question that there are many, many people out there who are suffering terribly. There are people who have lost their livelihood. There are people that are not getting any kind of income. There are small businesses that are shutting down and letting workers go. I don't want to minimize the enormous economic impact that COVID-19 has had on individuals and families and people in this country. And, the front page of the Wall Street Journal today was talking about the terrible, terrible occurrences of food shortages in Africa and other places around the world. But I want to focus on us, right? Because for most of us, we don't feel that intensity that others are feeling. For us, it's a matter of mind over matter, as opposed to matter over mind. And when it comes to mind over matter, how do we approach what it is that we have in a way that regulates this feeling of either abundance or lacking, so that we hold on to experiences of faith and trust, as Jill and Judy, you both mentioned. So any other comment before we continue reading the text? All right, Jill, you good with continuing to read? We're almost at the end.
So this is how we should okay.
Yeah, right here. That's where you are.
So this is how we should understand our verses. The Lord shall yield.
The land shall yield.
Land, sorry about that, shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat your fill in a manner that accustoms you to eating only a little, with moderation and limits. Thus, you shall live in security, since by definition, you will not be worried during a drought. Worry about the future will not disturb your rest.
Okay, so this is just, I found to be such a beautiful paragraph. So this reinterpretation of, right, this verse here, Ecclesiastes, a worker's sleep is sweet whether he has much or little, but the rich man's abundance doesn't let him sleep. So we know the tendency that when you have, you want more. And when you have more, you want more than that. And the more that you have, the more you worry about whether or not you can keep up with all that you have and whether you're going to lose it. And when you have very little, you're not so worried about whether you have a lot or a little, because you know you only have a little and you can rest easily. Right? That's the intention of this verse. And so going back here, the land shall yield its security. When will the land shall yield its fruit? When will the land yield its fruit? When you know that no matter what you eat your fill, that you're satisfied with what you eat, that you don't have this desire for more. That's the way he's reading this verse. The land shall yield its fruit only when you understand that no matter what the land yields, you are satisfied with it. And in that instance, then you can live in security, right? So that, again, let me just make sure everybody understands. The land shall yield its fruit. You shall eat of your fill in a manner that accustoms you to eating a little, with moderation and limits. And only thus shall you live in security, since by definition you will not be worried during a drought. Worry about the future will not disturb your rest. I called somebody today. I called a member of our congregation. I called a lot of people earlier, but I called a member of our congregation who is checking in on some of the seniors in our community. And he has a long list of people. And he says, the seniors in our community have a much better approach to COVID-19 than some of the younger people. And he was talking to one woman who said, this rush on toilet paper in the very beginning, I just don't get it. What were people concerned about? Worst comes to worst, take a washcloth, use the washcloth, and then wash it, and then use it again. Why were people so focused on this lack of, as opposed to paying attention to what it is that we do have? And he said he hears this much more often from the senior members that he calls in our community than the younger members. So, yeah, Neil. You're muted, Neil. You're still muted. Neil, you're still muted. Now you're non-muted. Start over again.
Now you're in trouble. Doesn't this teach us about that you shall have plenty and all that? Teach us that we should store up for the seventh year, that if we moderate our eating and moderate our use of items, then plan ahead a bit, which oftentimes we don't need to do in our land of plenty. But now we see where we should have planned ahead a little better.
Very good, right? So one of the ways in which we can read this text is if you do plan ahead and you only eat moderately, in other words, if we live within our means all the time, then when we're faced with financial crises such as we are now, downturns in the economy, if we know that we have continued to live in our means or below our means, then we can manage those droughts. Excellent. Other thoughts? Yeah, Leora.
I actually see in this text, one thing that really clear to me is that, yes, you have to prepare and you have to get your marbles together, but on the other side, you have to trust in God. If God is telling you don't work the earth, that means the sixth year will have abundant fruit to yield and store.
Exactly. What would you say is one of the basic causes of suffering, emotional suffering I'm talking about, that people, endure?
Worrying
Worry around what specifically? What's defined by that worry?
happen in the future, or what's has happened, trying to do over what's happened in the past.
Okay, good. So a lot of people worry about either things that may have happened or things that might have happened. What else might people worry about? What else causes suffering and despair?
Future.
Food, lack of food, lack of shelter, lack of basics.
Exactly. The idea of the lack, the absence, a sense of not having enough love, not having enough time, not having enough material, not having enough entertainment, not having enough pleasure, not having enough joy, not having enough fill in the blank, right? That lack of absence
Yes.
is that which is one of the primary causes of suffering. And so what is the antidote to that kind of worry or that kind of suffering?
For what you have.
Say that again, Lou.
You satisfied with what you have.
Good. If I heard you right, it is pay attention, notice, be mindful of what it is that you have. How many of you have ever practiced mindful eating? Do you know what mindful eating is? Right, mindful eating is looking at the food that you have on your plate. And first of all, noticing how much you put on your plate. The other night, Carolyn and the kids and I watched the Jerry Seinfeld stand-up comedy from New York that he did some months ago. And he has this very, very funny routine about going into Las Vegas buffets and the ridiculous amount of food that people pile onto their plate, just for this feeling like they have to taste everything and eat everything. So mindful eating is number one, just noticing what's on your plate. Then after noticing, taking the time to say a bracha and pay close attention to how you eat it and how slowly you eat it and how you chew it and what it feels like and what it smells like and what it tastes like and how many chews do you go through before you swallow it, and looking at the food and not being distracted from the newspaper or the television or anything else. I guarantee if you eat like that, you'll probably eat less. You'll most likely eat slower. You'll appreciate whatever it is that you're eating more, and you'll see that your cupboards will remain a little bit fuller than they were before. Try it. See what it, pick one meal in the next, 24 hours and really eat in the most mindful manner possible. See if it makes a difference. Yes, Sandy.
Keeping kosher requires mindful eating and mindful shopping.
For sure. Excellent. Yeah, Lauren.
I was going to say we start off mindful eating. I've been watching my grandson he mindful eats. When he doesn't like something, he tastes it. No, like, he spits it out. He doesn't just shove food into his mouth to eat. He's very particular. I mean, I think when he first started eating, he ate it, but he's very particular about what he likes and what he doesn't like. I mean, and I watch him eat. I mean, he won't just eat for the sake of eating, where I watch other people just absent-mindedly eat. They
Yes,
sit down and eat, a whole bag of cookies just because it happens to be there.
that's the good one. Absent-mindedly eating as opposed to mindfully eating. Sandy?
An example of this is we were on a cruise a number of years ago on one of these big ships that has the whole Lido deck where there's buffets open, 42 hours a day. And I can remember Rebecca and I walked up, we were getting in line to order something, to get something for lunch. And we saw this very large man who was walking away with a plate piled with a humongous, Art's Deli looking sandwich and a lot of stuff on the side. And we looked at one another and said, I think I'm just going to go over and get some fruit. That just seeing the quantity of it made us mindful of, I don't want to see all this. And I don't know if he ate it or not. I didn't follow him, to at least see if he actually consumed what he took. But if anyone was in the Catskills years ago in any Grossinger's like hotel, the quantity of food it came to tables in my limited experience. I had a cousin who had a hotel and I visited, and the people who you could order pancakes and waffles and 3 kinds of eggs and 6 kinds of fish for breakfast, and people would have all of it just because it was part of the plan. So
Yeah, that's why in mindful eating, not only do we slow down and notice, our hand to the fork to the mouth, putting the fork down, chewing, tasting the food, but we also try to anticipate the desire before each bite and notice what's going on in our body. And generally, right, the response in that situation is to eat a little bit less, as I said, to eat a little bit slowly, and to approach eating in a, definitely healthier fashion. So, all right, that's this first text, right? All the way back up from the land shall yield its fruit and you shall eat your fill and you shall live upon security. Fascinatingly, we take a text that, deals in a situation called Shemitah, which cannot be practiced anymore, and turn it into a text about our own mindful eating and how we can live with a sense of gratitude and not a sense of lacking, a sense of appreciation for what it is that we have and not a sense of worry about what we don't have, right? That's the essence of the way this first text is being translated or understood by the Katav Sofer, so that whether or not we have a Shemitah, we always have a proper approach to the material that is in our lives.
Did you say that they don't practice Shemitah anymore?
Well, in Israel, there, yes, there are certain farms within the Orthodox community that do, but when the Katav Sofer was writing this in the 1800s, way before the state of Israel had been reestablished, there was no such a thing as Shemitah. Shemitah really only applied to the time when we were living in the land of Israel. And now there are certainly lots and lots of farms that practice Shemitah, but do it in all sorts of interesting ways, and more than most sell their land to non-Jews so that the land can continue to be worked. Because it's the law as described in the Torah is impractical, to say the least. Okay, let's take a look. So these were the questions for you to consider and think about. What do you worry about? What do you think causes this worry? And what helps you become balanced in the face of your worry? So things to meditate on as we go into the week. And And you'll notice that the chat feature is back on. So Jill just used it. If you want to use the chat feature, you are certainly welcome to do it and learn from each other. All right, next text, Rabbi Abraham ben Jacob Saba, Suror Hamor. How about Leora? Would you read this text? Wait, where is Leora? Oh, you disappeared your picture.
Okay. I'm here. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Are you good with reading this?
Yes.
And by the way, I choose Lily and Leora, but if there is somebody else who would love to try their hand at the Hebrew, I know Sandy, you always are game for an opportunity. Just raise your hand and I will be more than happy to give you a chance to read some Hebrew.
I
Go
would
ahead,
gladly
Leora.
defer to Leora.
Okay. וכי תאמרו מה נאכל בשנה השביעית, הן לא נזרע ולא נאסוף את תבואתנו, וציוויתי את ברכתי לכם בשנה השישית, ועשה את התבואה ל3 שנים.
Perfect. Okay, Sandy, you can read in the English if you're
I
okay
will.
with that.
I would be happy to do that. And should you ask, what are we to eat in the 7th year if we may neither sow nor gather in our crops? I will ordain my blessing for you in the 6th year so that it shall yield a crop sufficient for 3 years. The way things go, a wealthy person with fields, vineyards, possessions, and parcels does not experience lack. He assured himself his heart is uncharitable, insensitive to the hardship of the poor person. Therefore, the Blessed Holy One instituted the Shemitah year, in which it is forbidden to plow or plant, so that even the wealthy person will experience lack. He will sense the life of the poor, and so will raise his eyes to heaven, trembling, saying, "What shall we eat?" This will then arouse the feelings of compassion in his heart for the poor person. He will join with him in his suffering and understand his depressed spirit. And by virtue of this, I will ordain my blessing.
So this one, of course, I thought of Ziggy Boxer when I chose this text, and he's not on our class this afternoon, but really it's for all of us. So the verse, right, he's playing on these two bold sentences, and you should ask, what are we to eat? How is that connected? V'tziviti et birchati, I will ordain my blessing. What's the connection, he says, between the first verse and the second verse? In your own words.
It's a question and an answer.
What's the question?
Manuchal, what shall we eat? And then the next one, God will take care of us.
Close. What shall we eat is, who asked that question?
The people.
I ask it of myself in the moment of Shemitah, but what am I really asking when I ask that question, what shall I eat? Or what shall we eat?
Eat, yes, and to God.
The people who don't have.
Yeah, what I'm really doing is I'm asking myself, what is everybody out there eating? Right? And it's not just about what am I eating, but
and
what's everybody eating? Yeah, Maxine.
Well, I was just talking out loud, thinking out loud. What shall we eat? It doesn't say what shall I eat? It's what shall we eat? So he's thinking of others as well. What do the poor eat? What does everybody eat?
Right. When I'm hungry, what I'm supposed to do in my hunger is not just notice my hunger and fill it, but what I do in noticing my hunger is recognize that there are other people who experience that sense of hunger and don't have the ease by which they can go to the refrigerator or the pantry and get food. So by putting ourselves into this position once every 7 years, it's sensitizing us to the vast needs that exist in the world. The many, many people who every night go to sleep as if it's a Shemitah year, who don't choose because Torah tells them that this is the year they have to not feed, right, not produce, that this is the way they live all the time. And in that recognition that people are living this all the time, v'tziviti et barachti, the opportunity, the command to bring blessing into the world exists, particularly in this way, by sharing my food with others. That's the blessing that results in my experience of hunger. Right? So, questions? Yeah, Neil, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, the question, isn't Shemitah also a time when the land is to recover, as opposed to only the people to take note of themselves?
Yes, but like I said in the first verse, the Shemitah doesn't apply at the period of time when, you know, the Tzror Hamor, who's living in, you know, the late 1400s and early 1500s, is preaching, right? He's saying to his congregation, his shul community, I need to make this relevant to all of you. And there are people in our community who have, and there are people in our community who don't have. And there are people outside of our community that we should be responsible for and we should worry about. And how do we get there? We get there in the moment that we feel pangs of hunger. In the moment that we feel a lack, we extend that feeling of lack externally out into the world and push ourselves to be more generous and more gracious. So what helps you see clearly in the moment, in the moment, the blessings that are in the plain sight before you? What obscures your vision? And what do you find helps you to open up your eyes? Right? Maybe for you, it's not when you feel hungry, you notice other people are suffering. But what is it? What, right, causes you to open up your eyes and see the suffering? And what motivates you to respond to that kind of suffering? George, you about to say something?
Nope. You're commanded to do it. That's the point.
So for you,
don't ask what you feel like. And by the way, this is a hope. There is no rational explanation of this. You know,
meaning the Shemitah is a hook.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It doesn't mean it's not one of the 613 mitzvot, but I mean, we can come up with reasons. But you know, it's like a mikveh or a kashrut, you know, things like that, that they're just given. Or the red cow, the red calf, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. They're, according to all of the categories of the Torah, this is one of those that has no reason. But the reason that's given in this text is a profound one. The reason that it's given is to remind you to have a more charitable heart. That's the reason it's given. So the question that I have for all of us is, what helps you to have a more charitable heart? What opens up your eyes to those in need? Ruth Ann.
When I see it directly in front of me, when I'm outside and I pass by a person, you know, person begging, who it awakens me to what I'm not seeing, you know, when I'm just in my house, and I have to be, it's almost real to me when it's right in front of me.
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting thing about this stay-at-home order. I've shared with you that when we pray in a room, we have to pray in a room with windows, so it forces us to see outside. When we have stay-at-home orders and we don't go outside and see the suffering, how can our heart be moved? Right? So for Ruth Ann, when you go out and you see something, your heart is moved, and then you act in a charitable way. What do we do when we're stuck at home? How do we remember the obligations that each one of us has to be charitable in our heart?
The website reminds us every day.
Which website?
SDS.
Okay, good. Right? That's why we did Giving Tuesday, and that's why we have the Ezra Fund, and that's why, yeah. By the way, I missed it, unfortunately. I don't know how many of you saw the concert for the Abba Udaya community last week or the beginning of this week. I'm so sorry that I missed, and then I didn't send it out to everybody. I saw the emails only after the fact to not advertise that our friends in Uganda, are going through all sorts of tremendously difficult challenges. So that's one of the ways in which we could, by paying attention to websites and going online and noticing the pain and suffering. Anything else for any of you that, opens up your heart? Yeah, Lauren.
Well, I keep a grateful journal every day. So I'm grateful for the things and the blessings I have in my life. And I'm reminded of that. And it's just by an accident, I guess, of birth that I was born in the United States, because my grandparents came from Europe. And so, I think about my grandmother, at the age of 16, sailed across the Atlantic Ocean by herself and came to New York and saved money to send for the rest of the family, enabling my parents to be born in New York. Why didn't she didn't do that? So I've had the opportunity to be born in the United States of America. And so I am reminded of that daily, that I have that blessing of being born in the United States. And, you were talking about food. So I was raised in a family that wasn't wealthy. Food was often an issue. And, and Mark and I would go food shopping, and I would fill my refrigerator. My greatest joy would be to stand in front of a full refrigerator and look at a full refrigerator. I don't know, it just gave me great joy to stand in front of my full refrigerator and know that I had food to feed my children. It just was a blessing in my life. It just always brought me great joy to have food in my refrigerator, because it wasn't always plentiful in the house that I was growing up in. And so I am reminded of that daily. So.
Thank you. Anybody else before we move on? Yeah, Maxine. You're muted, Maxine.
To interact, making them aware that there's people that don't have. And like my nephew is always taking the kids when they were younger, and he takes his grandkids now on like Thanksgiving or different holidays, and goes out and they serve the meals and go out and talk to people that don't have, teaching them, be grateful for what we have, and it's our responsibility to go out and help the others. So that's one way when you actually interact and teach your children to do that.
Okay, let's move on to the next text. Volunteer to read Hebrew, English. George, you want to read the Hebrew for us?
וכי ימוך אחיך ומטה ידו עמך, והחזקת בוגר ותושב וחי עמך.
Excellent. Will you read the English as well for us?
Okay, if your kinsman being in straits comes under your authority, and you hold him as though a resident alien, let him live by your side.
Okay, so what's the pshat? What's the simple understanding of this verse?
Okay.
It doesn't have to be George, anybody. What's the simple understanding of what this verse is trying to teach us?
Help people.
Okay, right, yeah. Help those who are in need when we have a responsibility to that individual. Right, because if your kinsman being in straits comes under your authority, right? You have some obligation to that person. Let him live with you, bring him in, welcome him into your home so that he is taken care of. All right, who wants to read the commentary? The commentary is by the Al-Sheikh from Torah Gems. Who wants to read it?
I'll read if no one else wants to.
Thank you, Sandy.
Sure. The preceding verses were set in the plural, but when scripture comes to instructions for supporting and helping the poor, it speaks in the singular. It is generally the case that when there is a need to support another person, everyone puts it off onto someone else. That other person is really closer to him, that other person wealthier. Therefore, the Torah speaks to each one of us singularly, as if saying, you are obligated to help that poor person. Don't let yourself off by pointing to another.
Okay, so what you're missing in the very beginning is Leviticus 25:36 is written in the plural. Leviticus 34 is written in the plural. 35 is written in the singular. So they're approaching this as very clearly. Whose authority is it to take care of those in need?
Everyone.
Yeah, Rabbi, can I ask a question here?
Of course, George.
Umata yado, under your hand, or it says under your authority. What does that mean exactly? Doesn't mean somebody you come across on the street, does it? Or what does it mean?
Well, because it's an achicha. So if it's your fellow, you notice that you perhaps, did business dealings with that individual, and that individual owes you money, and all of a sudden something terrible has happened to that individual, and they have no way of paying you back, but you still, have the credit, that you are owed. So they are under your authority, and they now are your responsibility. You can't abuse them. You have to take care of them. You can't say, well, he owes me money, let other people manage it. Let him go seek help at the local food bank.
Yeah.
It's your responsibility.
Okay.
My questions, our questions from Slater. When do you sense that you hold back, waiting or hoping that someone will do the work for you? Or what prevents you from taking personal responsibility for your work, your relationships, your wealth? Or how do you view others who turn to you for help, relying on you to do for them? These are big questions, aren't they? Asking us to be a little bit vulnerable in these questions. Yeah, Ruth Ann.
I don't know. Okay, so I'm being vulnerable, and I think what I withhold back is in I always want to help and give something, but I think I withhold back in thinking that there are others who can give more. I mean, I'll give something, but probably not as much as I should.
Good. I think that's I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a pretty common experience that we have, which is there are people better suited. There are people who are more capable than I to be able to help whatever individual, organization, institution, fill in the blank. And because we think that, we don't do what it is that we're capable of doing. And we're probably capable of doing so much more than we think that we're capable of. So I guess this verse is saying to us, what are you capable of? What are you able to do? A couple weeks ago, we had a Zoom conference call with the organization that we are now part of called Second Nurture. Shake your head yes or no if you've heard of Second Nurture. Okay, so some of you have heard of it, some of you have not heard of it. Second Nurture is an organization that helps take foster children in the foster system and find them homes. But what we as a Shomer Torah Synagogue community are doing as part of Second Nurture is not only finding homes, right, seeing if individual members of our congregation can foster a child for a period of time, but for all of those who can't, asking ourselves the question, what are we capable of doing? If I can't, if I am not capable of bringing a child into my home for a period of time, what am I capable of? Can I go food shopping for the family? Can I come over and tutor that child? Can I take the child to a museum, assuming when we are able to do those kinds of things? Can I offer my expertise in homework? Can I say to the family, what do you parents need, since you are now adding a whole level of stress to your life by taking in this foster child? What can we do to ease your burden? Do you need me to go, run errands for you, go to the cleaners, take care of your banking, manage X, Y, or Z? Right? Does this family need clothes and toys and books? There are a lot of things that we are capable of doing, even at the same time when we recognize the things that we are not capable of doing. And that's what this verse in Torah is asking, to look hard and say, when do you hold back? When you shouldn't? When do you wait for somebody else to step forward because you're hoping somebody else will step forward? I think of all the people who stepped forward over the years that I have served this community as synagogue leaders, people who have served more than their share and yet still step forward, because by being part of this community, they recognize that they are not consumers, but they are producers. Right? I mean, that's not to say they don't consume all of the wonderful things that Shomer Torah Synagogue provides, but more often they see themselves as producers. They see themselves as essential elements of the synagogue to continue to allow the production of whatever it is we're producing, Torah, classes, tefillah, spiritual, community, fill in the blank, but they want to invest themselves in making sure that we continue to produce. And then there are lots of people in this congregation who I see, God love all of them, who only approach their relationship as consumers. There's always somebody else to go into the kitchen and make lunch. There's always somebody else to volunteer for the board. There's always somebody else who can pack up the mishloach manot and deliver it. There's always somebody else who can take care of those things. I'm done, I'm tired, whatever it is. And what this passage, this pasuk is saying is, who are you? Producer or consumer? And again, I'm choosing Shomer Torah as one example. Choose SOVA, choose world hunger, choose literacy, choose, homelessness in Los Angeles, choose the, bankrupt political system that we have, choose supporting Israel, choose Jews in Africa. It doesn't make a difference. Anything that you choose, the question is, where are you at and what holds you back? Shall we do one more for the last 5 minutes, or are you done? I hope these texts have challenged you. Just as a quick review where we've been at. Text number 1 was about mindfulness. How do we approach what we have so that we can be more mindful when we're missing something and appreciate what it is that we have? How can we sustain ourselves in the long run by controlling our desires in the short run? How can we eat in a way that helps us appreciate each and every bite so that we regulate our desire? That was the first text. The second text: how does our lacking, our hunger, challenge us to notice the hunger and the lacking of others, and then motivate us to respond with blessing? The third text is, how do we see all those individuals in need and all those organizations in need as my responsibility? How do we see, right, that we are the one that those organizations come under authority, that those individuals come under authority, that I can't step back from my obligation? Those are the 3 texts that we have studied so far. Would anybody like these texts? Would you like me to send them to you? Raise your hand if you want them. Carol, Claristenfeld. Here, so let me do this. Let me just, because I'm going to forget. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I'm going to share, sending an attachment. Okay, so Lily, did you want this text or no? Yes. Neil, did you want the texts?
I'll take a copy, please.
Okay, I'm sending it to, Al Feeder, yes. Robert Carroll, yes. Lauren Schwartzbach, yes. Judy Solomon, yes. Chesed Barbara Claristenfeld, yes. Jill Cutler, yes. Payline, yes. Ruth Ann R.A. Teach. Is it good or bad that I know everybody's email by heart?
Remarkable.
Okay. Maxine Silverberg, yes. Okay, did I get everybody who wanted it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Oh, Lou Lorch. Lou Lorch. Uh-oh, I don't have Lou. Lou, what's your email?
L-O-R-C-H.
L which Lorch?
L-L-O-R-C-H. Just L Lorch.
Okay. All right, so I think we're gonna not do the last text. You'll study it on your own, but hopefully you have food for thought, quite literally food for thought in this Torah learning. And I look forward to seeing you all in our future classes, on Shabbos for our services, our Zoom service, our virtual Kiddush on Saturday morning, and next week back again as well. I'm going to